House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, DCA, falsely claimed Wednesday that Democrats have never denied that there is a crisis on the U.S.-Mexico border, a statement directly contradicted by the words of multiple party leaders just months ago. Well, let me just say this. We have never not said that there was a crisis. There is a humanitarian crisis at the border, and some of it provoked by the actions taken by the administration, Pelosi stated during her weekly press conference in the Capitol Visitor Center on Wednesday. What is happening at the border is tragic, and we hope to address some of that in the disaster supplemental, the California Democrat added. And we understand our responsibility to secure our border. Pelosi's remarks bear a stark contrast to what the House Speaker and other Democrats have previously said about the situation at the border, referring to it as a manufactured crisis by President Donald Trump. During a joint press conference in January, Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, DNY, accused the president of using the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis, stoke fear, and divert attention. Further, House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer said of the situation at the southern border after a visit to El Paso, Texas, "The first, most dramatic thing we found was there is no crisis." President Trump signed a congressional bill to avert a second partial government shutdown and declared a national emergency to build a wall along the border after Democrats used to back the funding required for its construction. The president also declared a national emergency at the southern border and used his executive authority to go around Congress to obtain more money to build the security barrier. The current situation at the southern border presents a border security and humanitarian crisis that threatens core national security interests and constitutes a national emergency, he said at the time. Meanwhile, the Department of Homeland Security said earlier this month that illegal border crossing surged to a decade high in April with nearly 100,000 crossers arrested. On Wednesday, Alabama Governor Kay Ivey signed what many consider the nation's strictest abortion law, which makes any physician performing an abortion guilty of a felony in almost all cases. The exception would be when a pregnancy poses a serious health risk to the unborn child's mother. As expected, the national media have been critical of the Alabama law and have given little attention to the Alabama legislature's goal, which is to challenge the landmark 1973 Roe v. Wade Supreme Court decision by establishing personhood for a baby inside the womb. With personhood, the Constitution affords certain rights and protections, as explained by the bill's sponsor in the Alabama Senate, Senator Clyde Chambliss, R. Prattville. The way that this bill is drafted, it goes to ask the question of personhood, Chambliss said during an interview Thursday on Huntsville Radio's WVNN. The 14th Amendment gives people, a person, the right to life, liberty and property. But it doesn't say when a person becomes a person. Obviously, if somebody is walking around, we know that's a person. In the womb, do we know if that is a person or not? Unborn babies can hear, they can feel. At what point can they hear and feel and think and feel pain? And so, we need some guidance, he continued. We need some guidance. We need some guidance from the Supreme Court. So this bill has been drafted so that it goes directly to that question. It goes to the Supreme Court, hopefully. And we do expect it to be ruled unconstitutional at the lower court. It has to be. It has no choice because they have to follow Supreme Court precedent. That's no surprise. We know that's going to happen. We know that will be found unconstitutional on appeal, but hopefully, we'll have the Supreme Court to take up the matter. And we hope and we feel that the Supreme Court will rule this law constitutional because it gets to that personhood issue that is so important. With that in mind, there are still questions regarding the politics and the legal reasoning behind the law. 1. Why was this passed now and not when the makeup of the Supreme Court actually shifts in a direction to overturn Roe or until after the 2020 election? This is the first year of a quadrennium, which is the first year of a term for members of the Alabama legislature. Traditionally, big-ticket items are passed in the first year's legislative session, which began in March. Given the expected controversy of the issue, the leadership in the Republican-led Alabama legislature perhaps saw this as the best time politically to move on the bill, given voters will have moved on by the 2022 legislative and gubernatorial elections. The next best possibility for Alabama's legislature to pass such a law might not have come until 2023. Given that these cases take years to work themselves through the federal court system, the Supreme Court might not get to it until 2025 or 2026. By then, the Supreme Court might not be as favorable for conservatives. 2. The lack of an exception in the cases of rape and incest seems extreme. Why wasn't that included? The purpose of the law is to challenge the Supreme Court's 1973's Roe v. Wade decision by establishing a baby in the womb as a person. If exceptions are added for cases of rape and incest, then it contradicts the argument, according to the bill's sponsor, Representative Terry Collins, our Decatur. Ads by Rev Content. The reasoning is the same reasoning. Roe v. Wade was decided that the baby in the womb was not a person, Collins said at an event in Huntsville, Alabama before the bill's passage. So this bill bases its reasoning that the baby in the womb is a person. And we based it on the fact that in Alabama law, we currently consider the baby in the womb a person. If you were a drunk driver and you killed a pregnant woman, you have a double homicide on your hands. We voted as a state to be a pro-life state. Adding the exception for rape and incest could negate the argument that the baby in the womb is a person, she argued. The biggest thing to attack it with is to say, "What, you're not going to include rape and incest?" Collins said. Well, how do we say, the baby inside is a person unless they're conceived in rape or incest? If that amendment was to get on the bill, then I'll kill the bill because it won't go to the Supreme Court. It will contradict itself. 3. Governor Ivey said in her statement that this might not even be enforceable. So why was it passed? The intention of the bill is not meant to be enforceable according to its proponents, but a legal challenge to Roe v. Wade and force the court to rule definitively on the personhood status of the baby in the womb. 4. Would Alabama women be arrested under this law if they procured an abortion in another state? No. As written, the law makes the activities of abortion physician illegal. The state of Alabama would not have jurisdiction of what takes place in other states. 5. Does this bill imprison women who induce abortion on themselves? No. Its sole focus is on the provider. 6. Does it make it a felony for women, or just the abortion provider? Just the provider. 7. Would this make it illegal for a person to prescribe the morning after pill, since one would only take that if they thought they were pregnant, and this bill makes abortion illegal from the moment a woman suspects she's pregnant? The morning after pill, as prescribed, is legally considered birth control and not a form of abortion. The decision was based on someone in utero, someone pregnant, so we don't get into conception. We don't get into birth control, Collins explained. We don't get into the morning after pill, but in utero, which is the language they use that when a woman is pregnant. This bill criminalizes abortion through the doctor. And not the woman, but the doctor. 8. What makes this bill different from so-called heartbeat bills passed in other states, like Georgia? Georgia's law bans abortions after a physician is able to detect a fetal heartbeat in the womb. That can usually be at 6 weeks, which is before many women realize they are pregnant. In Alabama's law, doctors cannot perform an abortion once a fetus is in utero. 9. Does this bill make it harder for pro-lifers to win in 2020? That perhaps depends on the precinct. The block of voters many political watchers fear will be turned off by the Alabama law are suburban women. However, given the controversial actions of the New York State Legislature, and the statement of Governor Ralph Northam, DVA, the issue has made somewhat of a comeback. Although Democrats may attempt to weaponize the state of Alabama's actions politically, it will force the future Democratic presidential nominee to answer to questions about their party's view on the issue. Abortion is a get-out-the-vote hot-button issue for both parties, and one would have to assume it would have been at the forefront with or without the actions of the Alabama legislature. The Missouri Senate passed legislation Thursday that contains some of the nation's strongest safeguards for unborn babies and their mothers, including a ban on abortions from 8 weeks of pregnancy and a declaration that Missouri is to be a sanctuary of life. In recognition that God is the author of life, begins the Missouri Stands for the Unborn Act, HB 126, that State House Speaker Elijah Hauer, R., labeled the strongest pro-life bill in the country. It is the intention of the General Assembly of the State of Missouri to defend the right to life of all humans, born and unborn, and to declare that the state and all of its political subdivisions are a sanctuary of life that protects pregnant women and their unborn children, the legislation states. This comprehensive, life-affirming legislation prohibits abortions once a heartbeat has been detected, prohibits abortions when a baby is capable of feeling pain, and would outlaw abortion in Missouri upon the reversal of Roe v. Wade, summarized State Senators Dave Schatz and Caleb Roden in a joint statement. The bill's approval by the Republican-led state Senate, with a vote of 24-10, came just hours after Alabama Governor Kay Ivey, R., signed into law a bill that bans most abortions at any time during pregnancy, except those necessary in order to prevent a serious health risk to the unborn child's mother. The Missouri legislation now heads to the Republican-led House for approval, before it can go to the desk of Governor Mike Parson, also a Republican, who expressed support for it on Wednesday. Thanks to the leaders in the House and Senate, we have the opportunity to be one of the strongest pro-life states in the country, Parson said. Incest. Doctors who perform abortions after the 8-week period could face 5 to 15 years of jail time. Women who receive abortions after the 8th week of pregnancy would not be prosecuted. Additionally, if Roe v. Wade were to be overturned, Missouri's measure includes a complete ban on abortions except in cases of medical emergencies. The Missouri legislation also contains contingency plans if the courts block the proposed 8-week ban, including a range of bans from 14 to 20 weeks of pregnancy, and a ban on all abortions due to race, sex or a diagnosis of Down syndrome. Momentum is clearly on the side of life, and it is only a matter of time until our nation's laws protect this foundational human right for all children, born and unborn, said Susan B. Anthony List, SBA List, President Marjorie Dannenfelser as she reacted to the state Senate's approval of the Missouri bill. Polling released earlier this year by SBA List found that 82% of Missouri voters, including 66% of Democrats, 83% of independents, 83% of women, and 61% of those who identify as pro-choice voters, support a law prohibiting late-term abortions. Pop superstar Rihanna went after Republican lawmakers in the state of Alabama over their recently signed abortion legislation, describing them as shameful idiots curtailing women's rights. Take a look. These are the idiots making decisions for women in America, the Grammy Award-winning singer wrote in a Twitter post, accompanied by an image of Republican lawmakers who voted in favor of the legislation. Governor K.I.V. Shame on you. View image on Twitter. The bill, signed by Governor K.I.V. on Wednesday, makes it a felony for any physician to perform an abortion, except in cases where the mother's life is in danger. Under the new legislation, the woman receiving the abortion would not be liable to punishment, but physicians found guilty of carrying out the procedure could face between 10 and 99 years in prison, even in cases of rape and incest. Similar bills have recently been proposed and passed in states such as Georgia and Missouri, causing fury among Hollywood's pro-abortion lobby, who have threatened everything from boycotts to sex strikes. The 31-year-old Barbadian, who has in recent years also gained starring roles in various films, holds predictably progressive and anti-Trump views. In February, Rihanna was among the celebrities who turned down offers to perform at the Super Bowl in an apparent show of solidarity with ex-NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick in his stand against supposed police brutality. Last November, the Grammy winner also attracted headlines after by the U.S. Border Patrol of acts of terrorism over their use of tear gas as they tried to prevent migrants from illegally crossing the U.S.-Mexico border. Gene Simmons, bassist and co-lead singer for the rock band Kiss, made news when he visited the Pentagon on Thursday as part of an initiative to connect the American public to the United States military. But it was his emotional remarks about what America meant to him and his late mother that were remarkable. "I'm a proud son of a concentration camp survivor of Nazi Germany. My mother was 14 when she was in the camps. I'm measuring my words because I'm about to break up again." He said, striking the podium. "My mother just passed at 93. But if Americans could see and hear my mother talk about America, they would understand," he said. He shared what it was like when he first came to America as a child from Israel, not speaking a lot of English. He said his mother worked 6 days a week, and in the evenings, they would watch the news together. By midnight, the 3 or 4 TV stations at that time would go off the air. But before then, they would watch a jet fly through the sky and melt into an image of the American flag. The national anthem would play, he said. "And every time my mother saw the flag, she'd start crying," he said. "As an 8-year-old boy, I didn't understand why, but from my mother's point of view, we were finally safe," he said, choking up. "I may have been born in the country that people throughout history have referred to as the Promised Land, but take my word for it, America is the Promised Land, for everybody. And don't be ashamed, don't hesitate. We need to teach young people to be comfortable with saying God bless America," he said. End of my story. His remarks were captured on video by McClatchy Sarah Kopp. Simmons' visit to the Pentagon transpired months ago. A Pentagon civilian employee met Simmons backstage at a show and invited him to visit the Pentagon if he was in the area. Simmons took him up on that offer. Simmons' visit highlighted the Pentagon's Know Your Mill initiative, which aims to educate Americans on exactly what members of the U.S. military do, and what jobs they fulfill, including everything from veterinarians to lawyers. What a privilege it was to meet an American icon who has such love for country, family, and our military, said N.K. Joyner, acting Principal Deputy Assistant to the Secretary of Defense for Public Affairs. We appreciate Gene and his wife, Shannon, for taking the time to visit with us and express such gratitude for the service and sacrifice of our men and women in uniform. The Know Your Mill initiative was launched in February 2018, amid growing concern that the U.S. military was becoming increasingly disconnected from the public it serves, which affects future recruitment and the sustainment of an all-volunteer military force. According to a fact sheet, fewer than half of 1% of Americans serve in the military, and fewer than 15% of young adults have a parent who has served. In addition, less than 30% of 17 to 24-year-olds are eligible for military service. More and more, military service has become a family affair, with 80% of those in uniform today having had a family member serve in the U.S. military. Joyner said the Know Your Mill initiative is about connecting Americans to their military. We want to create conversations that bring civilian and military communities together, she said. President Trump's Department of Homeland Security, DHS, has released about 9,000 border crossers and illegal aliens into the interior of the United States over the last 8 days, federal data confirms. Catch and release totals obtained by Breitbart News confirm that between May 6 through May 13, roughly 9,000 border crossers and illegal aliens were released into a variety of American communities by DHS. This indicates that at least 1,100 border crossers and illegal aliens have been released into the country every day in the past week. The catch and release process often entails federal immigration officials busing border crossers into nearby border cities and dropping them off with the hope that they show up for their immigration and asylum hearings. The overwhelming majority of border crossers and illegal aliens are never deported from the country once they are released into the U.S. Today, there are anywhere between 11 to 22 million illegal aliens living across the country, the majority of which are concentrated in states like California, New York, Florida, Texas, and Illinois. Over the last 8 days, the 9,000 border crossers and illegal aliens released into the U.S. were mostly dropped off in El Paso, Texas, a community that absorbed 5,000 nationals in the last week, alone. Additionally, 1,900 of the nationals were dropped off in San Antonio, Texas, as well as 1,600 released in Phoenix, Arizona, and 500 released in San Diego, California. Since December 21, 2018, the Trump administration has released 177,600 border crossers and illegal aliens into the interior of the U.S. The majority have been dropped off in San Antonio, where 69,200 have been released, and El Paso, where 61,500 have been released. Former Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach has exclusively detailed at Breitbart News 3 executive actions the Trump administration and DHS officials could take to immediately end catch and release, including creating additional detention space where immigration court hearings can be quickly heard. Kobach has also warned that wage hikes for America's blue-collar and working class will not continue if illegal immigration levels keep soaring. At DHS's current rate, more than 40,000 border crossers and illegal aliens are released into the interior of the U.S. every month, and more than 10,000 are being released every week. By the end of the year, DHS will have released more than 480,000 border crossers and illegal aliens into American communities should catch and release continue, in addition to the projected 500,000 illegal aliens who will successfully cross the U.S.-Mexico border this year, undetected by federal officials. Every year, the U.S. admits about 1.2 million legal immigrants, with the overwhelming majority, nearly 70%, coming through the process known as chain migration, whereby newly naturalized citizens are allowed to bring an unlimited number of foreign nationals to the country.